Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We've all heard of the fundamental principle of karma, where if you do good, you'll receive good consequences. And if you do bad, you'll receive bad consequences. Or,ធ្វើល្អបានល្អ ធ្វើអាក្រក់បានអាក្រក់. So, if a person commits a crime, gets caught, convicted, and sent to prison, one could say that that was karma. Logically, the contrapositive of this is if you did not receive good consequences, then that means that you had not committed good deeds. Or, បើខ្លួនមិនបានទទួលនៅលទ្ធផលល្អ មានន័យថាខ្លួនមិនបានធ្វើល្អ. So, does this mean that if you're born poor, that you had not committed good deeds in your past life? Is it your fault, if you believe in karma and Buddhism, that if you're born poor, is it your fault? The Buddha has actually objected against this strict interpretation because in addition to karma, there are multiple other factors at play here. If you believe that karma is the only factor, is the only reason why you are in your current situation, it can create a passive effect of living your life. You can just accept your fate. You can just let your karma run its course because you would just say it's bad karma. And so it creates a passive effect. And you won't be actively living your life, actively trying to change your destiny. You won't be actively living under the Dharma. And so the Buddha has objected against this. And he said that when people take the karma that they have done as the essential cause of your present state, then proper resolve, effort, also known as chantea, do not exist. And not having chantea in life, resolve, or effort would be meaningless in the belief of Buddhism. It would be meaningless, it would oppose the principles of Buddhism itself. Now, this is all to say that if you believe in Buddhism, if you believe in karma, it is not your fault, necessarily your fault that you were born poor. And so let's take that a step further. If a person, no fault of his own, is born into poverty, and if poverty leads to crime, then how much responsibility should this person bear, and what should our crime and punishment policies be to reflect the causes of poverty? A man is born poor. As a result of being born poor, he does not receive good food. He does not receive good nutrition. He lives in an environment which is harmful towards his cognition, development. When he is sick, he cannot afford health care. He cannot receive a good education, let alone afford one of quality. He is limited in his opportunities, in his options in life. As a result, what does he do? He takes the risk, takes a chance to commit a crime. When he commits that crime, he gets caught, convicted, sent to prison. Is this really karma? Surely he didn't choose to be born poor. And we can trace all these factors, we can trace from the moment he was born to the point where he decided to commit that crime in his life. We can trace all that. Now, yes, there are people who are not privileged and also don't choose to commit crimes. And so there is some level of individual responsibility here. But what I propose is that level of individual responsibility is not that high. It's not that high. Because if we as society constantly put pressure on this person in all types of forms, this person may eventually decide to say, you know what? This society hasn't been good to me at all. And so, you know what? I'm not going to follow the rules anymore. I'm going to break the rules just at a chance, at a glimpse of a better life, at a slightly better life. Cause and effect, karma, are made up of multiple factors here. The causes of crime that leads to one to commit a crime is both individual and structural. And so now I ask, if there are other causes of crime beyond just individual choice, beyond just individual responsibility, then what should our punishment policies be? What does it mean to fairly punish somebody? So I would like to engage with all of you today in thinking about the causes of crime beyond just individual responsibility and rethinking accordingly what fair punishment means. Because poverty plays a major role in changing the risk of whether a person will later become a criminal or not. For instance, poverty affects you biologically. The effects of poverty are being discovered every day, and there are new discoveries that are happening. And based on the research from Canada, it has shown that children born into poverty are more likely to experience psychiatric disorders, problems in social and academic functioning, chronic physical health problems, and they are more likely not to succeed relative to children from higher income homes. A US study reflects this as well, that the effects of poverty on brain development are start early and are seen in infancy, and the stresses of poverty changes your actual brain structure, causing problems in social functioning and learning. Those are the biological effects. I'd like to just share a little bit of personal experience about the social effects, something that I firsthand have heard. When I was in the US, I had the privilege and honor of serving as a public defender for the state of Colorado. A public defender is a criminal defense lawyer for the indigent, for the poor, for the underprivileged, for those who cannot afford a lawyer and are charged with a crime. I had a client, let's call him David. He was 50 years old, and he told me a story. He was born in a poor family, in a poor neighborhood. The schools there were underfunded. His family and friends had limited opportunities. They used or sold drugs, and with limited opportunities and exposure to all this kind of environment, he couldn't complete his education. He too ended up using and selling drugs himself. Eventually, as you can imagine, he was caught, arrested, convicted, sent to prison for 4 years. When he got out, he tried to change his life, tried to find a job, but it was hard, it was tough, because of all those lost years due to no work experience, no education, and also this time, a criminal background, a criminal record on his background. He couldn't find a job, limited opportunities, limited options, went back to doing what he knew, using and selling drugs. He was, as you can imagine, arrested, convicted, and sent to prison again, this time for 6 years. And so you can see here, the picture here, it's a revolving door. You get out of prison, you have limited options and opportunity, you go back in. You get out, you go back in. And this vicious cycle of poverty and crime is not that unique of a story at all. In fact, courtrooms across America are filled with criminal defendants who are considered poor. A study conducted by the US Department of Justice found that up to 90% of criminal defendants can qualify as indigent, meaning they can't afford a lawyer. And so all of this is just to show and say that poverty plays a major role in causing crime. Now, I'd like to pivot to Cambodia just for a second. And with limited data, this statistic can show us some interesting indications. If you can see here in the column which it says 1999, the Cambodia's poverty rate in 1999, according to the Ministry of Planning, was 35.9%. The Ministry of Interior reported that same year, the number of criminal offenses committed was around 6,000. Close to 20 years later, Cambodia's poverty rate dropped to 12.9%. This is according to ADB. And the Ministry of Interior reported that same year that the number of criminal offenses dropped to around 3,000. Now, what is important here is that throughout the span of close to 20 years, the poverty rate dropped around 23%, while the number of criminal offenses plummeted 50%. So keep in mind that correlation does not equal causation here, right? Nevertheless, it's an interesting indication. And this, in addition to other studies, in addition to my personal experience, leads me to believe that poverty is really a strong factor in the causation of crime, in changing the risk level of whether a person becomes a criminal or not later in life. And with that in mind, with an understanding that sometimes there are causes beyond just individual choice, what does it mean, again, to have just and fair policies for punishment? What does it mean to punish fairly? What should our policies for punishment then be? In thinking about punishment, there are generally 4 goals: deterrence, retribution, incapacitation, and rehabilitation. Deterrence means we punish to deter the perpetrator and other people within society from committing that crime. Retribution means we punish so that society and victims may feel a sense of avengement of this wrong that happened in our community. Incapacitation means that we punish to remove a dangerous person from society so that that person no longer is a danger to anybody else. And last, rehabilitation. We teach, empower, support, and help a person, provide a person with all the necessary means so that that person can live an honorable and dignified life in society. And so with these goals in mind, again, the question is, how should we punish when poverty is a major factor with these goals in mind? Would, for example, deterrence or retribution work against somebody who stole because they're poor and hungry? What about if a man hits his wife and commits domestic violence? Sure, we can punish under retribution and incapacitation to remove that person from his family for a short period of time in order to help the wife and the children. But what happens when he gets out? What if he has an alcoholic problem? What if there's an addiction problem? Will he become a better man once he leaves prison? And it is on this note that rehabilitation can greatly help. What if there were programs that help alleviate conditions of poverty? What if there were programs that help with addiction? What if there were programs that help build familial and community bonds? What if there were programs that help further a person's education and help provide that person with the skills and means necessary to re-enter society for employment? What if those programs existed? Now, each case is unique in its own way and must be considered on a case-by-case basis. But we also have to consider the whole picture. With regard to the man that hit his wife, yes, it is absolutely terrible that he did that. Okay? And maybe through retribution and incapacitation, we can remove him for a brief period of time. But has our punishment laws and policies considered that this family is also poor? Removing him from his family, have we considered who is the breadwinner here? What if he is the sole breadwinner? It's unfortunate, but what if that's the case? And it's not rare at all. Who will pay the rent? All right? Who will pay for the kids' education? Oftentimes, as a public defender, a lot of families, clients I represented, I learned that some of them become homeless because the father was in prison. Right? And so, have we considered all of this? And as mentioned, what about his alcoholic problem? And when he gets out, will he be able to find a job and re-enter society? Have we provided rehabilitation programs in addition to punishment in the form of retribution or incapacitation? And it is on this note where I want to, in light of the theme today, finding the significance in the insignificance, is I want to stress the power of support. support in all types of forms. First, we should be more empathetic, forgiving, compassionate, and we should support one another. We should support each other in personal relationships, in our community, and in our society. With regard to the example of children and poverty and negative brain development, studies have also shown that if those children build consistent and caring and supportive relationships with their parents, they can build resilience against those negative stress factors. And so that is very important here. Second, no stigmatization upon the poor, criminals, and addicts. We have to help elevate each other and support each other. And I know some people may say, but wait, there are people who were born in poverty, started from the bottom, and then now they're here, right? Now they've succeeded. Yes. Okay, I agree. Those people exist. But I'd like to add something. I guarantee you they have had support and love and cared for by mentors, by their communities, family, and friends as well. And when we talk about crime and punishment, and when we talk about policies, it's important that these laws and policies are tailored toward everyone, not just the exceptional few, especially those who are less fortunate and not as lucky. And last, one of the most important forms of support is investment into communities. This type of investment can be in the form of laws and policies, but it can also be financial investments as well. In Chicago, the city where I went to law school, there are neighborhoods that have been neglected by local city governments and have fallen to drug and gang violence. And meanwhile, there are neighborhoods that have flourished because they receive billions of dollars of tax subsidies. And so I ask that we work towards and support reform and policies that are important in reducing inequality, alleviating conditions of poverty, and building communal bonds. Thank you very much.